In this video, I am using a tool that I got from Lee Valley. I believe it's Veritas, I'm not sure. Anyway, it actually utilizes a rotary tool, in this case a Dremel, and allows you to use the Dremel then as a small sort of router, and it comes with an adjustable fence, with a micro adjuster, depth stops, all kinds of cool stuff. And so what I've done here is I've actually chucked up a solid carbide 1/8 inch bit. I think I got it somewhere on Amazon. They're pretty readily available, and not that expensive. I want to say under $10. And so what I did is I also purchased the Inlay stringing online. And so all it really is 1/8 inch strips of thin veneer, not thin veneer, standard veneer. And I have accounted for the thickness of the inlay banding using my depth stops. And I'm simply routing a channel along the seam where the border and the chessboard meet. And I don't want it to be flush. I actually want the inlay banding to stick up, just a few thousandths of an inch above the surface. That way, I can scrape that flush. The problem with trying to get it level is if you hit a low spot and now your inlay banding sits below the rest of the surface, you're stuck having to level the rest of the surface down to the level of the inlay, and that can lead to a lot of problems. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to go around the chessboard. In the corners, obviously, because the router bit is round, I'm going to be left with rounded corners. I'm simply going to come in afterwards, use chisels to kind of square that corner. I also purchased I do a lot of this 1/8 inch inlay on my projects. It seems like a good size. It's thin, but it's big enough to be noticed. I purchased a 1/8 inch chisel, and that comes in very handy for cleaning out the grooves, and pretty much everywhere it's necessary, as it is a 1/8 inch chisel. One other thing to note, if you see me running the router along the surface but you don't hear it on, there's a good reason for that. What I'm actually doing is I rotate the router bit such that the furthest point and the nearest point are sort of in line with where I need to cut. And the reason I do that is because when you're laying up this veneer, the field and the border, you're bound to have gaps where the veneer, because you did not seam tape this is two different applications of veneer, you're going to have small gaps. And so your job there is to make sure that the router bit is going to hit just into the chessboard on one side and just into the border on the other side. That way the 1/8 inch inlay is actually going to do two things. It's going to look nice, and it's going to take out any of the gap. In this case, there's some gaps, maybe for anywhere from a 32nd of an inch to a 16th of an inch, all less than 1/8 of an inch. So once I route this groove, the gaps are going to disappear, and it's going to be replaced with a nice inlay. Now again, I had mentioned this earlier. What I'm doing here is I'm using the chisels to square off the rounded corners, and all I do, I know you can see my hands are kind of in the way here and the camera doesn't focus the best, but all I'm doing is I'm using a 1-inch chisel, or as wide of a chisel as possible, and letting it rest along the bottom edge of the groove, and just sliding the chisel over until the left or right end of the chisel sort of cuts right into the rounded edge. I know that's probably hard to understand, but in practice it makes sense. So I'll go from one end and I will kind of cut in to where I think the squared corner should end, and then I'll go in from the other end and cut right into that point, and then use that 1/8 inch chisel that I talked about to chisel out the waste.
Nice.
In some cases, the router bit will pull fibers out, especially with the Sapelli veneer, vertical grain. That's real grainy. And so I'll just go back with a flat, big wide chisel and kind of chisel those fibers off, sever them, so that you've got a nice clean groove for the inlay to sit in. Alright, that's it for that. Now I just have to miter the inlay and go ahead and glue it down. Thanks for watching.